Well, a little earlier, Chief Rabbi mentioned anti-Semitism as one of the elements that unites the Jewish community. Well, it will unite it in London still, because anti-Semitism is still very much about in the East End of London. Even today, it's possible to find publications which deny the Holocaust ever happened. And that rabid anti-Semitism has given birth to a bitter verbal racism and violence on the streets, which is why a London church, St. George's in the East, decided to play host this week to an exhibition of relics from Auschwitz. A church may not be the obvious place to house an exhibition, but Don Stokes is no ordinary clergyman. He was a London cabbie for most of his life.
I grew up in East London. When I was a kid, the war was on, and people were getting killed. I lived through some very serious tragedies. Lots of people I knew got killed. After the war, I just assumed that the thing that the war was about was all over, that we'd fought the Nazis and we'd won. And when I heard about the Auschwitz exhibition, I thought it was a good way to share the kind of understandings about what can happen to people if they just haven't got enough information about fascism and violence and intolerance and stuff like that. And that's how it began, really.
The scale of what happened in Auschwitz is nearly impossible to comprehend. The thousands of items are a small testimony to the 4 million human beings, most of them Jewish, herded into Auschwitz to be exploited, experimented on, tortured and brutally murdered. Gassing was the commonest form of mass execution. 5 to 7 kilos of Zyklon B were necessary to kill 1,500 people, and 20,000 kilos were used in 1 year alone. The bodies were burnt, the victim's hair was turned into cloth. The brutality of the camp is depicted in drawings made by the few that survived. Some were even smuggled out at the time, in order to let the world know what was happening. Children's toys and clothes. In Auschwitz, nobody was spared. The exhibition is full of haunting human reality without being harrowing. The organisers hope everyone, including the children of the East End, will be provoked by it to consider the effects of extremism.
About 5 years ago, I was in a lot of pain, and one night I decided to make my way down to the London hospital and sign myself in. And while I was waiting, I could hear the people in the next cubicle. There was a youngster in there talking, and they were asking him what had happened. And then I heard the doctor talking to another doctor, and he said, well, he's going to lose his eye. And it was just an East End Cockney kid. And he was saying, I don't know what happened. He said, I was just walking down Valence Road, he said, and all of a sudden about 50 blokes came running down the street and shouting and screaming, and one of them threw a brick in my face. But he kept saying, I don't know why they did it. I'd never seen them before. They didn't know me. I don't know why they did it. And they finally brought this kid out. And I saw the trolley go by. And I'm the Bengali kid. And I knew what was happening, you see. I knew what was happening, I knew. And I thought, it's wrong. The kids that did it are my kind of kids. They're not bad kids. And this kid was a Cockney kid with just a different colour. And I realised what can happen if they get into this racist stuff, this fascist stuff. We got a long history of atrocities perpetuated against Jewish people down through the centuries, beginning with some of the church fathers. You got some really dreadful anti-Semitic statements made, and it got laid into European culture, into European society, that Jews were outside the pale because they had killed the Son of God. And I think you can trace a logical line running through these persecutions that make it much easier to understand why you end up with a thing like the Holocaust. I mean, you can't blame the little Jewish tailor over in Hackney for the death of Jesus Christ. It's just ludicrous. But that kind of thinking has entered into the history of Christendom, of Europe. Once you go down this road of hating other people and projecting your distress onto other people, you don't only deny them their humanity, but you lose your own. And so this exhibition really is for the kids who maybe went out and knocked that other lad's eye out.
But the racism and prejudice which are alive and well in the East End of London today have been with us for many decades. In the 30s, it was the Jews who were on the bottom rung of the immigration ladder and were being persecuted. The Cable Street mural is a present-day reminder of the struggle that was put up against fascism, triggered off by the harassment of the local Jewish population at the time. A reminder that's not as effective as one would wish.
As I was going home from work, about 8:30 in the evening, and about 15 youths were coming down towards me. They were about 20, 25 yards away, and one of them came up to me, stand in front of me. He was taller than I was, and he didn't say anything, and he just started hitting me. And I asked him, what do you want? He didn't say anything and hit me. And I tried to stop him and hit him back. And the others started to run towards us. And I realized that they were going to surround me. And then I started to run and slipped and fell on the floor, and they surrounded me. And they kicked me around the face, and I had my jacket over me, cover my face with it to cover any serious damage. And kicked me around for about a minute and stabbed me on the back and laid me on the floor and ran away. I had 2 stitches on the back. I stayed in a hospital for 2 nights. And it's not really healed yet, but it's healing slowly.
Billy, too, was attacked in Cable Street, but there's nothing new about that. A pathetic continuation of the history that by now should not be repeating itself. Over 4 million people were exterminated by the Nazis in Auschwitz. The vast majority were Jews, in the largest single crime in the history of man. It's in the hope that we should not forget, but learn from the horrific atrocities of man's inhumanity to man, that Don Stokes offered the crypt of his church to house the exhibition. But does he really believe there is hope to be found?
I think this is the human condition. And I think what we do to children will determine whether there's any hope for this exhibition or for this world or not. This is what God's about. Children, and it's what happens to children that makes the difference. I think evil can be undone. I think people who have been damaged can be reclaimed if they get enough support of the right kind. I think there is some hope to come from this exhibition. If we give children the right kind of information, they'll be able to decide between what's right and what's wrong for themselves, and they won't make the same kind of mistakes that we've made. That's what I want to happen for this exhibition. As a child made in the image of God.